Imagine waking in complete darkness. Not the comfortable darkness of your bedroom where you know exactly where the door is, where the light switch waits just an arm's reach away. No, this is a darkness that feels ancient and alive. The kind that existed for centuries before electricity was even a whisper in someone's imagination. You lie on a rough straw mattress, and your back already aches from nights spent on surfaces that have seen hundreds of travelers pass through. Your hands are calloused, your fingernails are permanently stained with dirt, that soap, crude, gritty soap made from animal fat and wood ash, can barely touch. Around you, you hear the sounds of others breathing, some snoring, one person coughing violently into the darkness. The air smells of sweat, spilled ale that has soaked into wooden floorboards for decades, something vaguely rotten that you have long stopped trying to identify, and underneath it all, smoke, always smoke. You have a decision to make. Do you rise now, in the pre-dawn stillness, to begin another day as the innkeeper of a medieval tavern? Or do you pull your threadbare wool blanket tighter and pretend just a little longer that you are someone else, somewhere else, living a life that does not begin with fire tending and endless labor? But you already know the answer, don't you? You rise. You always rise. Because if you do not light that great hearth in the common room, if you do not get that fire burning before the first light of dawn touches the eastern sky, then every guest in your inn, and there are at least 30 souls sleeping under your roof this night, will wake to a cold room, and cold is not just uncomfortable in the medieval world. The cold is dangerous. Cold kills. The cold drives people away. And an empty inn is a dead inn. Have you ever thought about what it truly takes to survive a single day in the medieval world? Not the romantic version, not the fantasy taverns where everything is somehow mysteriously clean and the ale is always perfectly cool and the roasted meats are always perfectly seasoned. No, the real world, the actual medieval world, where a day's work in a tavern means a struggle against filth, spoilage, theft, violence, and the constant grinding awareness that one mistake, one misplaced coin, one guest who leaves without paying, one fire that spreads to the thatch roof could destroy everything you have built. If you find yourself fascinated by these forgotten lives, by the stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary work in impossible conditions, then I urge you to stay with me. Put a like on this video. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another journey into the lives of those who came before us. And please write in the comments where you are watching from. It is the year 1387. The location is a substantial town, perhaps Worcester or Norwich or Coventry in England, or if we venture across the channel, perhaps Bruges or Lyon. Your tavern, called the Red Lion or the White Swan or the Crown and Thistle, names that would have been painted on a wooden sign outside your door for those few who could read, displayed as a symbol or image for the vast majority who could not, sits on the main street of the town, not far from the market square. The medieval world is a world in motion. Merchants travel between towns with goods. Pilgrims move toward distant shrines, seeking miracles or redemption. Soldiers move toward war. News travels slowly, carried by mouth and memory. A rumor from London might take 3 weeks to reach a provincial town, and by then it has transformed, grown strange and distorted, become something half fact and half fantasy. Your tavern sits at the intersection of these currents. It is a refuge for the traveler. It is a meeting place for the local craftsmen and merchants. It is where deals are made, secrets are whispered, and sometimes history turns on conversations that happen over bowls of pottage and cups of ale. Your name is Thomas, or John, or perhaps you are a widow, which would make you a woman of considerable independence, unusual, controversial, but undeniably practical. You inherited this tavern from your husband, who died 5 years ago, leaving you with the buildings, the debt, and the responsibility. Running a medieval tavern is difficult enough when you are a man. When you are a woman, it becomes a constant performance, a careful balance between providing excellent service and defending yourself against whispers that suggest you are something far less respectable. But let us say you are Thomas, for simplicity. You are 43 years old. You have run this tavern for 17 years. You have seen 3 kings' names on the official documents that the tax collectors bring. You have raised children who have left to find work elsewhere, because a tavern keeper's children learn early that life offers more than perpetual labor in the family business. You have buried 2 wives, the first from childbed fever, the second from a flux that came one winter and never left. You have lost money to thieves disguised as guests. You have fought with drunk soldiers. You have negotiated with suppliers who try to sell you spoiled meat. You have hidden contraband from merchants who pay very well for silence. You have turned away beggars and taken in pilgrims. You have lived, in short, a life that is completely ordinary for a medieval innkeeper, and therefore extraordinary in almost every way. Here is what is fascinating, though. Here is what might make you reconsider your assumption that the medieval world was somehow simpler, or less complicated, or less full of genuine human drama than our own. Your life as an innkeeper is not primarily about survival anymore. Survival, if you have made it to 17 years, is no longer your central concern. Yes, you must be careful with money. Yes, you must watch constantly for theft and fraud. Yes, you must manage an incredible complexity of relationships and responsibilities, but you have transcended mere survival. You have become something like a businessman. You manage inventory, you negotiate contracts, you track debts and credits in a complex mental ledger that never ever closes. You understand profit margins. You know which ales sell best in winter and which in summer. You understand that a guest who is treated well today might recommend your tavern to a merchant friend next month, and that merchant friend might become a regular who spends significantly more money throughout the year than a one-night visitor ever would. You have, in essence, discovered the fundamental principles of commerce, of marketing, of customer relationship management without any of the modern language, of course, but with all of the practical understanding. And yet, despite this, despite being engaged in one of the most lucrative businesses of the medieval world, assuming your tavern is reasonably well placed and you do not make catastrophic mistakes, you wake every single morning in darkness and stunned uncertainty. You wake knowing that today could bring a significant loss. A fire could destroy your tavern and all your inventory. A plague could pass through town and empty your rooms. A wealthy patron could be robbed on the road, decide your tavern is where the theft occurred, and demand recompense. A group of soldiers could arrive and demand lodging and entertainment and refuse to pay. The king's tax collectors could arrive with an impossible levy. An enemy could spread rumors that your ale is watered down, or that your kitchen harbors rats, or worse, that you employ prostitutes, which carries penalties both financial and social. This is the reality that awaits you in the pre-dawn darkness. This is what it means to be a medieval innkeeper. Before we delve into the work, before we explore the complex social dynamics and the ethical compromises and the financial calculations that dominate your days, we should pause. We should stand in the doorway of your tavern, let's say it is mid-morning now, perhaps 10 o'clock, after you have already been working for 5 or 6 hours, and we should truly attempt to understand what it would feel like to inhabit this space, not just intellectually, but sensorially. Because the medieval tavern is fundamentally a physical experience, and to understand your life, we must understand what it actually feels like to exist within these walls. The first thing that strikes you, assuming your eyes have adjusted to the dim interior, is the color. Not the bright colors you might imagine from fantasy versions of medieval life. The interior of your tavern is dominated by browns and blacks and grays. The wooden beams of the roof, darkened by decades of smoke and age, are nearly black. The stone walls, thick stone walls, that are the mark of a more substantial establishment, are dark gray or brown, their surface rough and uneven. The wooden tables and benches, worn smooth by thousands of hands and bodies, are a muddy brown. The rushes, covering the floor, meant to absorb spills and provide insulation from the damp earth beneath the building, range from pale gold fresh rushes, perhaps only a week old, to a dingy grayish brown, where they have become compacted and soaked with years of accumulated moisture and refuse. The lighting is deliberately dim. You understand this because you are the innkeeper, and you have learned through bitter experience that poor lighting serves multiple purposes. It hides the questionable stains on the walls. It makes the ale appear clearer and more inviting than it actually is. It creates an atmosphere of intimacy, which guests seem to find comforting. It also means you do not have to spend money on tallow candles except in the evening, and tallow candles are expensive. They smell awful, like rendering animal fat, which is exactly what they are, but they burn, and they provide light. In the dim morning light, you can make out the main features of the common room. Against the far wall, opposite the entrance, is the large hearth. This is the heart of your tavern, literally. The hearth is built of stone, and it is large enough that a person could stand inside it without bending. The fire, which you lit 3 hours ago, is now burning steadily, though not yet at full heat. Smoke drifts upward, toward the hole in the thatched roof that serves as your chimney. Some of it escapes through that hole. Much of it does not, instead filling the room with a perpetual haze that makes your eyes water if you are not accustomed to it. You are accustomed to it anymore. You notice the smoke only when there is less of it than usual. Along the walls are barrels, ale barrels, wine barrels, water barrels. Wooden spigots hammered into the fronts of the ale barrels allow you to dispense the drink quickly. The wine barrels are sealed and must be opened with more care, because wine is more expensive and more valuable. Near the barrels, bundles of dried herbs hang from the wooden ceiling beams. Rosemary, lavender, thyme. They serve a dual purpose. They provide flavoring for foods and ales, but they also supposedly help mask bad smells and ward off evil humors. You are not entirely convinced the herbs actually do much of anything, but they are cheap, and they create the impression of orderliness and cleanliness, which is worth something. Above your head, in the rafters, where the smoke gathers and clings, you can make out the dark shapes of cured meats, sausages, hams, strips of salted pork hanging from hooks. In the corners and under various tables are sacks of grain, bundles of preserved vegetables, wheels of cheese wrapped in cloth. These are arranged seemingly haphazardly, but you know the location of every single one. You have trained yourself to move through this space with the unconscious efficiency of a creature in its own territory. Toward the back of the common room, there is a doorway, heavy wooden door, reinforced with iron bands, that leads to the kitchen. Through that doorway, if you were to walk through it now, you would see more of the same visual landscape. More storage, more darkness, more smoke, more of the accumulated detritus of a working kitchen. Now, the smell. This is not a detail that most modern people adequately prepare themselves for when they imagine the medieval world. The smell of a medieval tavern, the actual smell, not the sanitized version, is something that would probably cause many modern people to gag. Start with the basic foundation, the smell of spilled ale. For decades, ale has been spilled on the wooden floorboards. Some of it soaks into the wood and ferments slowly. Some of it is absorbed by the rushes. The rushes are changed perhaps once a month, sometimes less frequently in winter, when fresh rushes are more difficult to obtain. But even fresh rushes cannot entirely eliminate the smell of accumulated fermented ale, because the wooden floors themselves have become impregnated with the smell over years and years. It is a sweet, slightly sour smell, vaguely noxious, and it is always there in the morning, in the evening, whether you have just cleaned the floor or not. Layered on top of this foundation is the smell of human bodies, unwashed human bodies. People in the medieval world do wash, despite what modern legend suggests, but they do not wash frequently. The weather is cold most of the year, and heating water takes significant effort and fuel. Therefore, a complete bath might happen once or twice a year. Washing hands before and after meals is common. Hygiene rules exist and are somewhat enforced, but this is perfunctory, usually accomplished by rinsing the hands briefly in a shared basin of water, which becomes increasingly unpleasant as more people use it throughout the day. In your tavern, at any given moment, perhaps 15 to 20 people are gathered in the common room. All of them are wearing layers of wool and linen that cannot be washed frequently. Wool, in particular, traps smell. The human body, when enclosed in unwashed wool in an unheated space during winter, produces a smell that is distinctive. It is not necessarily a horrible smell, but it is alien to modern nostrils. Some people describe it as earthy. Others describe it as simply unpleasant. Combine this with cooking smells. Pottage simmers in a large pot over the fire, a combination of grains and whatever vegetables are in season, sometimes with meat if you have been able to procure it. The smell of pottage, cooking herbs, vegetables, grain, is actually quite pleasant. The smell of bread baking, if your tavern has an oven, many do not, is genuinely appealing. But underneath these relatively pleasant smells is something else. Decay, rot. Sometimes the cheese has begun to turn. Sometimes the meat, despite being salted, develops an off smell. Sometimes the preserved vegetables are not quite as preserved as you thought. You have learned to smell the difference between an acceptable level of spoilage, because everything spoils eventually, and you cannot afford to throw away food and a level of spoilage that would make people genuinely ill. It is a fine line, and you have walked it carefully for 17 years. And then there is the latrine. Your tavern has a latrine pit in the courtyard, positioned discreetly behind the main building. It is a simple pit dug into the earth, with a wooden structure built over it. Waste falls through the structure into the pit. Every few years, the pit is emptied and the waste is taken away, presumably to be used on fields somewhere, though you try not to think too carefully about that. The latrine does not smell good. Latrines do not smell good. The smell occasionally drifts into the tavern, particularly when the wind is wrong or when someone uses the latrine after it has been especially busy. Finally, there is smoke. Not just the wood smoke from the hearth, though, that contributes, but also the smell of things that have burned. Candles burning. If you are using tallow candles, which smell like rendered animal fat, herbs being burned to supposedly purify the air, the smell of meat that has been held too close to the fire and has begun to char, the smell of spilled wine that has fermented on the stones around the hearth. All of these smells exist simultaneously. Your nose does not distinguish between them in the way a modern person might. Instead, you experience them as a single, complex, integrated odor that is simply the smell of the tavern. To you, after 17 years, it is home. The sound environment of your tavern is complex and ever-changing, but certain elements are constant. There is a fire. A burning fire makes sound, the crackle of wood splitting, the hiss of sap boiling out of freshly split logs, the steady roar of flames at their height. If you are standing near the hearth, this is the sound that dominates. If you are on the other side of the room, it becomes a background element, a kind of constant white noise. There is water boiling in large pots, water splashing as it is carried from the well to the kitchen, water being poured for washing. The sound of water is ever present. There is the human voice, conversations, arguments, laughter. Medieval taverns are loud. People speak loudly because the ambient noise level is high, which requires louder speech, which raises the ambient noise level further. During the busiest times of the day, your tavern is perhaps dominated by a general roar of sound individual conversations, not distinguishable as separate entities, but rather a unified mass of human vocalization. There are specific sounds that recur. The sound of a mug being set down on a wooden table, the sound of coins being exchanged, the clink of metal, the sound of dice rattling in a hand. And if you catch someone gambling without giving you a percentage, they will be thrown out, though this is more honored in the breach than in the observance. The sound of benches scraping across the wooden floor as people move about, the sound of the door opening, the creak of old hinges, the gust of wind from outside, then the door slamming shut again. Less pleasant sounds, the sound of someone vomiting, which happens periodically, usually late at night when people have drunk too much. The sound of a fight beginning, the raised voices, the crash of tables being overturned, the sound of fists striking flesh, the sound of something wooden breaking, the sound of the latrine, which, thankfully, is far enough from the common room that this is not a constant auditory experience, but which becomes noticeable when someone uses the path that passes near the main door. If you were to touch the surface of a table in your tavern, you would feel smoothness combined with stickiness. The wood has been worn smooth by decades of use, but it is also covered with a thin layer of accumulated grime-spilled ale that has dried and left a film, food particles, who knows what else. Your hands are rough from constant work. The palms are calloused from hauling water, from scrubbing pots, from handling rough materials. The fingers are stained. At least one fingernail is perpetually discolored from an infection that nearly cost you the finger 2 years ago. The air temperature in your tavern varies dramatically depending on proximity to the hearth and time of day. Near the fire, it is hot, genuinely uncomfortable if you are standing directly in front of it. In the corners, particularly in winter, it is cold. Not freezing, because the presence of many bodies and the fire provide some ambient warmth, but definitely chilly. If a guest is standing near the door, they can feel the draft of cold air from outside. The floor is damp, always, even in summer, with all the shutters and the door open. Even then, the floor retains moisture. In winter, it is actively wet in some places. Stepping on the rushes is stepping on something that feels damp and slightly spongy, potentially harboring small creatures, fleas, lice, perhaps the occasional mouse. The walls, if you were to touch them, would feel rough and slightly damp as well. Stone retains moisture. In a poorly built tavern, you might worry about rising damp, but your tavern is reasonably well built, so this is not a constant concern. Still, the walls are cold to the touch, except near the fire, where they retain some of the heat. Wool and linen feel rough against the skin. If you are wearing the clothes that are typical for a medieval innkeeper, a linen shirt underneath, a wool tunic on top, perhaps a leather apron, then you experience constant mild discomfort from the scratch of the fibers against your skin. The discomfort becomes so familiar that you stop noticing it most of the time. Here is what ties these sensory experiences together into something meaningful: the feeling of perpetual occupation. Your mind is never, ever empty in this tavern. There is always something that requires attention. Is the fire burning at the right level? Is the pot of pottage simmering rather than boiling? Is that group of men in the corner playing for money? And if so, am I taking my percentage? Is that young man too drunk, and might he cause trouble? Is the ale in that barrel beginning to go off? How much do I owe to the grain merchant, and when is he coming to collect? Is that woman genuinely the wife of the man she arrived with, or should I be concerned about her safety? This constant vigilance creates a particular mental state. You are never relaxed, but you are also never panicked. You exist in a state of moderate, sustained alertness that has become your baseline. When you lie in bed at night, trying to sleep, you find yourself mentally running through the day, considering what might have gone wrong, planning for tomorrow, worrying about debts and potential problems. There is also a sense of belonging. You belong here. This tavern is yours. You have shaped it through 17 years of daily decisions. You know every corner, every potential problem, every regular customer. You have a reputation, whether good or bad depends on whom you ask, but it is a reputation that is recognized throughout the town and beyond. When merchants and travelers speak of inns in your town, they speak of yours by name. This is success in the medieval world. This is a legacy of sorts. And underneath all of this is a constant awareness of precariousness. You are not poor. You own property. You have money, but you are not wealthy. You are not protected by family connections or noble patronage. One bad year, one significant loss, one catastrophe could undo everything. This awareness creates a particular kind of emotional background, not quite fear, but a constant vigilance, a readiness for disaster. In the modern world, if you wanted a drink, you would walk into a bar. The floor would be clean, either concrete or wood, swept and perhaps even mopped regularly. The smell would be, well, it would be stale beer and maybe some air freshener, depending on how well the bar is maintained. The air would be temperature controlled, either heated or air conditioned depending on the season. You would probably be able to see clearly because there would be electric lighting. You might order a drink from a bartender who has been trained in customer service, and that drink would be served in a clean glass. You would consume it while sitting on a clean chair at a clean table. You would not worry about the cleanliness of the water that was used to rinse the glass, because water treatment is rigorous and regulated. You would not worry about the freshness of the ingredients that went into your drink, because there are food safety regulations. You would not worry about being robbed or beaten, because there are security cameras and staff trained to handle disruption. The medieval innkeeper has none of these assurances. Every element that you take for granted is something that must be managed through constant attention, constant negotiation with suppliers and guests, constant vigilance against theft and fraud and disaster. What we understand from this exploration is that the medieval tavern is not primarily a place of leisure. It is a workplace. It is an extraordinarily complex workplace where multiple systems must function simultaneously. The physical systems of fire and water and food preparation, the social system of managing a diverse clientele with different expectations and different ethical standards, the commercial systems of managing inventory and money and long-term relationships with suppliers. To exist in this space, to make it function day after day after day, requires a particular kind of person, not necessarily an educated person, not necessarily a person of great social standing, but a person of considerable practical intelligence, emotional control, and willingness to work exhaustingly hard. Understanding the physical reality of the tavern allows us to move forward into understanding the actual work, the daily rituals and routines that dominate your existence. Because your day does not begin when the first guest arrives in the morning. It begins before dawn, when you rise and face the first challenge of the day: fire. The fire must be lit. This is not a poetic observation. This is a literal statement of fact, and it is the first thought in your consciousness every morning, waking or sleeping. The fire must be lit. If the fire is not lit, the common room is cold. If the common room is cold, the guests will be miserable. If the guests are miserable, they will complain. If they complain, they will leave your tavern and go to the tavern down the street, where perhaps the fire is better managed, or the ale is cheaper, or the landlord is prettier, if the landlord is female, or, for reasons that have nothing to do with logic but everything to do with medieval, superstition, and personal preference. But worse than guest dissatisfaction is the reality that without a fire, many essential tasks cannot be accomplished. Food cannot be cooked, water cannot be heated, clothes cannot be dried, ale cannot be brewed at the proper temperature. Fire, therefore, is not a luxury. Fire is a fundamental requirement of survival. You wake while it is still dark. You do not wake because of an alarm, because alarms do not exist. You wake because your body has learned, through years of repetition, that it is time to wake. You wake because somewhere in the pre-conscious realm of sleep and waking, you are aware that the fire has gone out or will go out soon, and this awareness nags at your body until you rise. You lie for a moment in the darkness, aware of the cold, your breath clouds in the air. Winter or summer, the pre-dawn hours are the coldest part of the day. You pull on your outer clothes, they have not been removed, just loosened, and make your way downstairs by feel and memory. You know the route well enough that you could walk it in absolute darkness, and often you do. The common room is dark and cold. The hearth is not dead, you did not let it fully extinguish last night, because kindling a fire from nothing requires flint and steel and patience, and you learned long ago that it is more efficient to keep coals alive through the night, but it is not burning. Ash has accumulated over the coals. The temperature is perhaps 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is cold enough that you can see your breath, cold enough that water has begun to freeze in the basins. Your first task is the ash. You move to the hearth and use a metal poker to carefully rake through the ash, searching for the hot coals beneath. You find them a section of orange-red heat buried under gray ash. You rake away the ash carefully, not wanting to disturb the coals themselves. As the coals are exposed to air, they begin to glow brighter. Now you need kindling. You have prepared kindling the night before, small, dry pieces of wood, selected for their ability to burn quickly and hot. You feed these pieces into the coals carefully, starting with the smallest pieces and working your way up to larger ones. Each piece catches with a small spark, a tiny flame, which provides the oxygen and heat that causes the next piece to catch. This process takes time. It cannot be rushed. If you add too much wood too quickly, you smother the fire and have to start over. If you add too little, the fire does not build. You must find the balance, adding wood gradually as each piece catches, building the fire one layer at a time. As the kindling builds, you begin to see better. The flames provide light. The temperature begins to rise, not dramatically, but noticeably. Your fingers, which have become quite numb in the cold, begin to sting as they warm up. Once the kindling is burning well, once you have small flames that are clearly not going to die without further encouragement, you begin to add larger pieces of wood. Split wood from the woodpile outside that you tended yesterday. These larger pieces will provide the steady, sustained heat that will warm the room throughout the day. By the time you have been working for perhaps 30 minutes, the fire is burning well. It is not yet at full heat, but it is burning steadily, producing visible heat and light. You can feel the warmth on your face if you stand close to it. Now, with the fire established, you move on to the next task: water. The well is in the courtyard. It is dark still, perhaps an hour before dawn, and cold, and you must venture outside. You take a wooden bucket and make your way to the well. The bucket is attached to a long rope, which is wound around a wooden mechanism that allows you to lower the bucket down into the darkness and raise it back up. You lower the bucket, feel the slight tug that indicates it has hit the water. Keep lowering, then raise it back up. The bucket is heavy, very heavy. A full bucket of water weighs perhaps 30 pounds. You carry it carefully back inside, setting it by the fire to begin warming. Then you return to the well and begin the process again. You will make this journey perhaps 6 or 7 times this morning before the sun rises. By the time you are done, you will have hauled perhaps 200 pounds of water. Your shoulders will ache. Your hands will be raw and cold despite the warming fire. Your back will protest with sharp pains. As each bucket is filled, you distribute the water to different areas. Some goes into large pots near the fire. For heating, this water will be used for cooking and for washing. Some goes into basins that will be set out for guests to wash their hands before eating. Some goes into large barrels for general use, though you have learned to be careful about this. Water stored in barrels can become stagnant quickly. While you are hauling water, the sky begins to lighten imperceptibly. The pre-dawn darkness transforms into a less complete darkness. The stars fade. The world becomes visible in shades of gray. By the time the sun actually rises, by the time the first rays of light actually touch the rooftops of the buildings, you have been awake for nearly 2 hours. You have lit the fire in the hearth. You have hauled perhaps 200 pounds of water, and you have begun the process of preparing for the day ahead. But you have not yet eaten. You have not yet had anything to drink. You have not yet dealt with any of the overnight guests or any emergencies that might have occurred while you were sleeping. And yet, somehow, you feel energy. The fire is burning. The physical work has warmed your body. The darkness is receding. The day is beginning. You move to the kitchen, where you begin the process of food preparation. A modern person has a very different morning ritual. You might wake at a time determined by an alarm rather than by your body's internal clock. You might take a shower, standing under water heated to a comfortable temperature by machinery designed specifically for that purpose. You might press a button and have light appear immediately from electric bulbs. You might put water in a machine that heats it in a few minutes, pour it over ground beans, and have a hot drink within moments. You might eat food that was prepared last night, or that requires only minimal preparation. Perhaps you buy it pre-made. You might sit down to eat without any sense of urgency, without needing to watch for disaster, without needing to remain alert for problems. The medieval innkeeper had no such luxury. Every moment of the early morning is consumed by physical labor directed toward basic survival and business functionality. The modern morning seems, by contrast, almost leisurely. What becomes apparent from examining this morning ritual is that the medieval world requires a particular kind of patience and endurance. The work is not particularly difficult. Anyone can haul water, anyone can tend a fire, but the work is incessant, and it is fundamental. Without it, everything else fails. Understanding this helps us understand why the medieval innkeeper's life is structured around the fire, around the basic physical requirements of survival. Before there is commerce, before there is entertainment, before there is social interaction, there is fire and water, there is heat and light. Everything else is built on this foundation. Once the fire is burning and the water is hauled and the kitchen is warming up, the next phase of the morning begins. The kitchen staff must be directed. The day's menu must be determined. Food must be prepared. And soon, very soon, the first guests will begin to wake, and your role will shift from physical laborer to innkeeper, to customer service provider, to businessman. You are not rich, but you are far from poor. You own this building and the land it sits on. You have money saved. Though never enough, there is always something that needs repairing, always something that needs to be purchased, always some upcoming expense that creates worry. You have probably lent money to regular customers, knowing that you may never see it again, but also knowing that the gesture builds loyalty. You have probably been robbed or cheated or overcharged by suppliers. This is simply the cost of doing business in the medieval world. But here is what matters. You understand money. You understand profit. You understand the concept of cost and benefit. You have probably never read a book about business, never considered your methods, management techniques, but you practice sophisticated financial management nonetheless, simply through the daily necessity of keeping yourself and your business solvent. Let us consider the finances of your tavern in concrete terms. Your primary income comes from the sale of ale. On a good day, you might sell 30 to 40 gallons of ale. The price varies depending on the quality you brew or purchase ale in different grades. The cheapest ale, the kind that most common people drink, might sell for about a penny per gallon. The medium quality ale might sell for 2 pence per gallon. The high quality ale or wine might sell for significantly more. Let us establish a baseline. A penny is a real coin in the medieval world. It is not nothing. A peasant laborer might earn 2 to 3 pence per day. A skilled craftsman might earn 6 to 8 pence per day. So when you charge a penny for a gallon of ale, you are asking for a significant portion of a laborer's daily wages. But people still buy. They buy because they enjoy ale. They buy because medieval life is hard and often grim, and ale provides a moment of respite. They buy because it is tradition and custom. If you sell 30 gallons on a good day at an average price of 1 penny per gallon, that is 30 pence. This sounds like nothing to a modern person, but it is a meaningful amount of money in the medieval economy. Now, what are your costs? The ingredients for ale are barley, hops, if you are purchasing ale from a distant brewer rather than making it yourself, and water. Barley is perhaps the largest expense. A bushel of barley might cost you 6 to 8 pence. A bushel can be used to produce roughly 30 gallons of ale, depending on the quality. So the grain cost per gallon is perhaps a quarter to a third of a penny. The hops, if used, might add another quarter penny. Water is essentially free, though someone must be paid to haul it, perhaps yourself or a servant. So you have 30 gallons of ale produced at a cost of perhaps 8 to 10 pence, which you have sold for 30 pence, a profit of 20 pence or so on the ale alone. This is not insignificant. But wait, you must also account for the person who hauled the water or the servant who helped with the brewing. You must account for the fuel burned in the hearth while the ale was being heated. You must account for the loan on your current inventory. Perhaps you do not own this ale, but rather you have a credit arrangement with a brewer and you must pay them within 30 days. The calculations become complex very quickly, and this is just one product on one day. You also sell food, bread, pottage, meat, pies, occasionally cheese or other items. The profit margins on food are generally lower than on ale. Food spoils. Waste is inevitable, but the volume is significant. On a busy day, you might sell food to 50 people, each spending anywhere from a penny to several pence depending on what they order. You also provide lodging. A guest might pay 2 pence to sleep in a shared room with straw bedding. A wealthier guest might pay a shilling or more for a private room. You do not have many private rooms, perhaps 2 or 3, so lodging is not your primary income source, but it is significant. You also have income from other sources: gaming, If people are gambling in your tavern, playing dice, playing cards, playing board games, you take a percentage. Perhaps you take 10% of the pot. This can be substantial on a good night. You might also have income from services. Providing a space for merchants to meet and conduct business, they might pay you for the privilege. Providing information, you know what is happening in town. You know the news that has arrived from traveling merchants. And people will sometimes pay for information or for the privilege of hearing it first. Now, your expenses. If you are a small operation, perhaps you have only one servant or one family member helping. If you are a larger operation and your tavern appears to be substantial, based on the description, you probably have 3 to 5 employees. A servant or apprentice might earn 3 to 4 pence per day, plus room and board. A skilled person, a cook, or a stable master might earn 6 to 8 pence per day. So your staff expense might be 30 to 40 pence per day, depending on how many people you employ. Next is food and supplies. You must purchase grain, meat, vegetables, and cheese. You must purchase fuel for the hearth wood or charcoal. You must purchase replacements for things that wear out: barrels, benches, rushes for the floor. Then there are taxes. Local taxes, probably, based on your business. Taxes to the royal court, taxes to the church. Medieval taxation is complex and often arbitrary, but it is also unavoidable. You might spend 10 to 15% of your revenue on taxes. There are also unforeseen expenses. Things break, the roof leaks and requires repair. The well becomes contaminated and must be cleaned. A customer is injured and demands compensation. You must pay a fine for watering down ale too much. You must pay compensation to someone for food poisoning. Adding all of this up, on a good day, you might have revenue of 50 to 60 pence, with expenses of perhaps 30 to 40 pence, leaving a profit of 15 to 20 pence. On a bad day, you might have revenue of 20 pence, with expenses of 30 pence, leaving you at a loss. This is why you worry constantly about money. This is why you know every debt, every loan, every financial obligation. This is why you know the price of things to a level of detail that would seem obsessive to a modern person, but which is absolutely necessary for survival. Here is another layer of complexity. You do not always have money. Your customers do not always have money. You operate on credit more often than on actual coins. A regular customer, a craftsman who comes to your tavern perhaps 3 or 4 times a week, might run a tab. He might spend 6 to 8 pence per week, but he might only have enough coins on him for 2 pence at a time. So he drinks on credit, and you keep track of what he owes. Perhaps he settles the debt weekly. Perhaps it runs for months. Perhaps he leaves town and you never see that money again. You do the same with your suppliers. You might buy grain on credit from a merchant, with payment due at harvest time. You might have a standing agreement with the local baker to buy bread daily, settling accounts weekly or monthly. This means that the actual coins in your possession at any given time might be significantly less than the theoretical amount of money you have made or owe. You might have revenue of 50 pence on a particular day, but only 10 pence in actual coins, because the rest is credit to customers or credit to you from suppliers. This requires a level of mental accounting that is quite sophisticated. You must remember who owes you what, and when it is due. You must remember what you owe to whom, and when you must pay. You must navigate this complex web of debt and credit without written records. Well, not entirely without written records, but the records are minimal. Perhaps a tally stick with notches cut into it to indicate amounts, or a few marks on a piece of parchment that only you can interpret. And underneath all of this is the constant awareness that you could lose everything. If a major customer skips town without paying, If a supplier decides to call in all his debts at once, if you are robbed, or if your business suffers a significant loss, the entire edifice could collapse. This is what it means to be a medieval businessman. You have no safety net. You have no insurance. You have no government agency to protect you. You have only your wits, your reputation, and your willingness to work exhaustingly hard. A modern business owner has many advantages that a medieval innkeeper lacks. You can hire an accountant to manage complex finances. You can get a loan from a bank with terms clearly spelled out in writing. You can buy insurance. You can operate on credit from suppliers with explicit contracts. You have tax laws that are clear and predictable. You have some protection if a customer refuses to pay. You can take them to court. You can report them to a credit agency. The medieval innkeeper has none of these protections. Everything depends on personal relationships and personal reputation. If you are known as an honest person who pays his debts, you can get credit. If you are known as someone who cheats customers, word will spread and people will stop coming to your tavern. What we understand from this exploration is that medieval commerce requires a particular kind of intelligence. Not book learning, you might not be literate, or if you are, only barely, but practical intelligence, the ability to calculate quickly, to remember details, to understand the relationships between different parts of a system, the ability to negotiate, to build relationships, to inspire trust. These are the skills that determine whether a medieval innkeeper survives or fails. So far, we have focused on the technical aspects of running a tavern, the fire tending, the water hauling, the financial calculations. But a tavern is fundamentally a social space. It is a place where people gather, where relationships are formed, where alliances are made and broken. Managing this social dimension is perhaps the most important skill an innkeeper must develop. Your tavern serves multiple classes of people simultaneously, and this requires a careful understanding of social hierarchy and how to navigate it without offending anyone. In the medieval world, status matters. It matters tremendously. Who you allow to sit where, what you serve to whom, how you speak to different people. All of these details communicate respect or disrespect, inclusion or exclusion. Your tavern is therefore a kind of compressed version of the medieval social hierarchy. Within these walls, all these different people must coexist. Your job is to make sure they coexist without killing each other. When a guest enters your tavern, you make a series of instant assessments. Clothing is the primary indicator of status. A person in fine wool, properly dyed, with a belt that suggests wealth, this is someone standing. A person in rough wool, stained and worn, this is a laborer or servant. A person in linen, with a leather apron, the tools of a craft visible, this is an artisan or tradesperson. You make these assessments instantly, and you adjust your behavior accordingly. The fine-clothed person is addressed with more formality. You offer them the best seat, which is typically closest to the fire and with the sturdiest bench. You bring them the best ale first, before serving others. You anticipate their needs. They want a private meal in a separate room, or they want to conduct business without being bothered by common folk. The laborer is offered a seat at the common table in the center of the room. The ale is whatever is cheapest. The food is whatever is available. You are polite, but not obsequious. You treat them as honest customers who will pay their bills. The artisan is treated somewhere in between. They are given a decent seat, decent ale, and you take their money seriously if they say they will return to pay at the end of the week. You believe them, but you also keep close track of the debt. But here is where it gets complex. You do not just follow this hierarchy mindlessly. You negotiate it constantly. A wealthy merchant who is known for being difficult to deal with might be treated with slightly less deference than his clothing would suggest. A laborer who is known to be honest and who has been coming to your tavern for years might be treated with more respect than his clothing would suggest. The hierarchy is real, but it is also flexible, negotiated based on personal reputation and long-term relationships. You must also manage conflict within the hierarchy. If a laborer and a merchant have too much to drink and begin to bicker, how do you handle it? If you side with the merchant simply because of status, you offend the common people who make up most of your regular customers. If you side with the laborer, you might offend the merchant and lose his business. The solution is to manage the situation so that no real conflict develops. You keep the merchant and the laborer separated. You monitor their ale intake and cut them off before they become dangerously drunk. You distract them with food or entertainment. You use subtle social cues to indicate that their behavior is not acceptable. This requires tremendous skill. You must be constantly aware of the room, constantly attuned to the possibility of conflict, constantly ready to intervene before things escalate. There is also gender to consider. Women are present in your tavern, but their presence is complicated. Widows sometimes inherit taverns from their husbands and run them independently. They are business owners like yourself. Wives might come with their husbands for a meal or a drink. Servants might come to carry messages or to fetch their employers. But women who come alone, unaccompanied, are viewed with suspicion. There is an assumption that they are engaged in sex work or seeking it. This assumption is not always wrong, but it is not always right either. You must navigate this carefully. If a woman comes into your tavern alone, you do not automatically assume she is a prostitute, but you also do not treat her the way you would treat a man. You might seat her in a corner, away from the main crowd. You might be slightly more distant. You might not serve her ale as readily. Ale drinking is associated with loose morality in women. On the other hand, alewives, women who brew and sell ale, essentially small business owners, are a recognized category. They might come into your tavern to check out your ale, to see what prices you are charging, to observe the competition. You treat them with professional respect, recognizing them as fellow business people. There are also clergy priests or monks passing through town. They have high status in the medieval world, and they should be treated with deference. But interestingly, clergy are also often viewed with some ambivalence. Priests are supposed to avoid taverns, so their presence is somewhat scandalous. A monk might stop by on his way to somewhere else, or to avoid getting drenched in the rain. You serve them, you are respectful, but there is a slight sense that their presence is slightly transgressive. There are soldiers, mercenaries, or soldiers in royal or noble service. They have a particular status. They are armed, they are dangerous, and they have money. You are happy to serve them, but you must also be cautious. Groups of soldiers can become rowdy quickly. They might gamble for high stakes. They might become violent. You must have strategies for managing them. Perhaps you have an arrangement where you serve them in one part of the tavern and keep the common people in another part. There are merchants, the lifeblood of a tavern in a trade town. They arrive with money. They often stay multiple days, and they spend freely. They are also interested in networking, in conducting business. They might pay for a private room or the use of your tavern as a meeting place. They are to be treated very well because they bring money and they also bring information, news from other towns, stories of recent events, gossip about other merchants. A merchant who likes you will recommend your tavern to other merchants, and soon you have developed a reputation that attracts this lucrative clientele. There are pilgrims, people traveling to religious shrines, seeking miracles or redemption. They might have significant money or might have very little. They might be pious and serious, or they might be using pilgrimage as an excuse to travel and experience adventure. You treat them with respect for their mission, But you also remain slightly cautious. Some pilgrims have been known to be con artists, using the pilgrimage as a cover. And there are the regulars, local people, who come to your tavern regularly, who have essentially claimed it as their own. Artisans gathering after a day's work, farmers coming to town on market day, families enjoying a meal together. These are the people you know by name, whose debts you track, whose stories you know. Your relationship with them is different, more personal, less formal. You might joke with them in a way you would never joke with a wealthy merchant. All of these people must be managed within the space of your tavern simultaneously. This requires constant social awareness, constant readiness to intervene, constant navigation of complex social hierarchies and relationships. It is exhausting, and it is also essential, because if you manage the social dynamics well, people feel welcome in your tavern. They tell their friends. They return regularly. They give you business. If you manage it poorly, people feel uncomfortable. They go to the tavern down the street. You struggle to survive. A modern bar owner might worry about things like liability and insurance and age restrictions on alcohol. A medieval innkeeper has none of these concerns. But a medieval innkeeper must manage social hierarchies and relationships in a much more direct way than a modern business owner does. In a modern bar, a wealthy person and a poor person might sit side by side without much interaction. The bar is a neutral space. Everyone is roughly equal because everyone is paying for service. In a medieval tavern, the hierarchy is much more explicit. The wealthy person and the poor person are sitting in different areas. They are served different drinks. They are treated differently. This is not seen as unjust or problematic. It is simply how the world works. What we understand from this exploration is that medieval social interaction is deeply hierarchical and ritualistic. Every interaction carries meaning. Who sits where means something. What someone is served means something. How they are spoken to means something. Understanding and navigating these meanings is not optional. It is essential for the innkeeper's success. So far, we have focused on managing normal situations, regular customers, commerce, social hierarchy, but medieval taverns are also places where the dark side of human nature emerges regularly. Theft, violence, fraud, danger. Managing these darker elements is another crucial part of the innkeeper's job. Your tavern is fundamentally a safe space. It is a place where people who are traveling, people who are far from home, people who are vulnerable can find refuge and shelter. But it is also a place where danger lurks. Your tavern attracts not just honest people seeking food and drink, but also thieves, pickpockets, con artists, and violent criminals. As an innkeeper, you must balance these two realities. You must create an atmosphere of safety and welcome, while simultaneously being vigilant against danger and ready to respond to criminal behavior. Let us consider the specific dangers that you face on a typical day. First, there is simple theft. A pickpocket enters your tavern with the specific intention of stealing from customers. He moves through the crowd, his hand moving with practiced precision to cut the purse strings of someone who has had too much to drink, who is distracted in conversation, who is not paying attention. The purse falls into his hand. He palms it, and within moments he is disappearing back into the crowd or out the door. How do you prevent this? You cannot, but you can make it less likely. You watch for suspicious behavior. You have staff to watch as well. You might have a reputation for being alert, which itself acts as a deterrent. A pickpocket who knows you are watching will choose a different tavern. You might also have an arrangement with city guards or local authorities to be present occasionally, which creates additional deterrence. If you catch a pickpocket, what do? You can throw him out. You can demand he return what he has stolen. If he refuses, You can call for help from other customers or from authorities. The punishment for theft in the medieval world can be severe, potentially mutilation, depending on the jurisdiction and the value of what was stolen. So the pickpocket knows the risks, but the potential reward outweighs the risk in his mind. Second, there is violence. Two men are gambling, playing dice for money. One of them accuses the other of cheating. Words are exchanged. Voices rise. The situation escalates. Before you can intervene, one of them has thrown a punch, tables have been overturned, and a fight is in progress. How do you handle this? First, you try to prevent it from reaching this point. You watch for increasing tensions. You might suggest to one of the parties that it is time to leave. You might separate the two men before things escalate. You might increase the frequency with which ale is served, or stop serving it altogether to reduce inebriation. If a fight does break out, you need to stop it quickly. This might require you to physically intervene, which is dangerous, or to call for help. You might have a servant or employee who is large and strong, whose role includes stopping fights when necessary. You might have access to weapons, a club, perhaps, or a sword that you can brandish to stop a fight. The goal is to remove the participants before significant damage is done. Broken furniture can be repaired. Broken bones heal. But a death in your tavern creates serious problems. You might be held responsible. You might be fined. The reputation of your tavern suffers. Third, there is fraud. A merchant comes to your tavern and conducts a business transaction with another customer. The merchant hands over money in exchange for goods. Later, the merchant claims the goods were counterfeit, or the money was worthless, and demands compensation from you. Were you responsible for verifying the authenticity of the coins? Were you responsible for verifying the quality of the goods? The answer is unclear. This is a gray area in medieval law. You were providing a space for commerce, but you were not directly a party to the transaction. Still, if you have a reputation for allowing fraud to occur in your establishment, your reputation suffers. You have an incentive to manage these situations, to try to resolve disputes between parties, to create a reputation for fairness and honest dealing. Fourth, there is prostitution. This is complicated. In some jurisdictions, prostitution is tolerated. In others, it is forbidden. Either way, it often occurs in or near taverns, because taverns attract transient populations, people with money to spend, and situations where people are disinhibited by alcohol. As an innkeeper, you must navigate this carefully. If you openly tolerate prostitution, you gain additional income, typically a percentage of the sex workers' earnings. And you attract customers the sex workers themselves need to eat and drink, and their clients are often customers. But you also risk legal problems if the authorities decide to crack down. You also risk damaging your reputation if you are seen as running a brothel rather than an inn. The solution that many innkeepers adopt is a kind of willful ignorance. You do not explicitly allow or encourage prostitution, but you also do not actively prevent it. If a woman and a man rent a private room, and what happens in that room is their business, well, that is their business. You benefit from the room rental and the food and drink sales, while maintaining plausible deniability about the exact nature of the activities occurring. Fifth, there is corruption of authorities. A city official or a royal tax collector arrives at your tavern. He is owed taxes. The amount he claims is higher than what you believe you owe. He threatens to have you arrested or your tavern closed if you do not pay. This is common in the medieval world. Corruption is rampant, and there are few mechanisms to check the abuse of power. How do you handle this? If you have connections, if you know an important person who can vouch for you, or if you have paid off the right people, you might be able to challenge the claim. If you do not have connections, you are essentially at the mercy of the official. You might pay a bribe, a gift, as it is often euphemistically called, to get the official to reduce his demand or go away. You might simply pay what is demanded, even if you believe it is unfair. You might try to negotiate, appealing to the official's sense of fairness or reasonableness, hoping that if you can build some personal rapport, he will be less harsh in his demands. None of these solutions is satisfying, but in the medieval world, there is no recourse to impartial authority. The official is the authority. You must deal with him as best you can. Sixth, there is the danger of being robbed yourself. Your tavern holds money coins from daily sales, money kept in reserve. A thief knows this. He might break in at night. He might bring weapons and companions. You are now not dealing with a pickpocket, but with a criminal gang. How do you protect against this? You hire guards, if you can afford it. You keep your money distributed, some with you, some hidden in various places, so that if you are robbed, the thief does not get everything. You might have a strongbox, kept in a secure location where money is stored. You might have relationships with local authorities that include some protection of your property, but ultimately, you are vulnerable. Your tavern is valuable, it holds money, and there are people willing to use violence to take that money. This is another constant source of anxiety in the medieval world. A modern bar owner has police to call if there is trouble. They have security cameras and alarm systems. They have insurance to cover theft. They have laws against fraud and prostitution that are enforced by authorities. A medieval innkeeper has only himself, his staff, his reputation, and his ability to manage situations through personal authority and relationships. It is a much more dangerous situation. What we understand from this exploration is that the medieval innkeeper operates in an environment of genuine danger. This is not like running a modern business, where the worst-case scenario is financial loss. The medieval innkeeper faces the possibility of violence, of robbery, of legal persecution. The ability to manage these situations, to read danger, to diffuse situations, to navigate complex legal and social relationships is essential for survival. We have now explored the major dimensions of the innkeeper's life: the physical space, the daily rituals, the financial management, the social navigation, and the dangers that constantly threaten. But we have not yet fully explored the psychological and emotional experience of living this life. What is it like, on a daily basis, to exist in this world? What does it do to a person to engage in this work, day after day, year after year? You do not sleep well. This is perhaps the truest statement that can be made about your life as a medieval innkeeper. Even when you are lying in bed, even when you are not actively working, some part of your mind is always alert, always calculating, always worrying. You lie in the darkness and think about money, about the weaver who came 3 weeks ago and promised to pay for his ale at the end of the month, but the month is nearly over and you have not seen him in 2 weeks. Did he leave town? Will you ever see that money? About the grain merchant who delivered short measures this week. Did he cheat you deliberately, or was it an honest mistake? About the tax collector who mentioned in a way that seemed almost threatening that your taxes might be increasing this year. These thoughts cycle through your mind endlessly. You rise tired, you work exhausted, and you retire tired. There is a weariness that penetrates your bones, that makes your back ache more than the physical labor alone would warrant, that makes your hands shake sometimes when you are holding something. The psychological burden of being an innkeeper manifests in multiple ways. There is the constant awareness of responsibility. There are people working for you, a servant, perhaps a cook, perhaps a stable boy, and their livelihood depends on your ability to generate income. If the tavern fails, They lose their employment. They lose their shelter and their food. You do not have legal responsibility for their welfare, but you feel a moral responsibility. These people have trusted you to provide them with work, with a place to live, with food. Failing them feels like a personal failure. There is also responsibility to your customers. Someone comes to your tavern who is traveling alone, who is far from home, who is seeking shelter and safety. You have, through the simple fact of accepting their money and inviting them in, taken on a responsibility to provide them with a safe place. If they are robbed while under your roof, you feel responsible. If they are food poisoned by something you fed them, you feel responsible. If they are harassed or assaulted, you feel responsible. This sense of responsibility extends beyond the practical into the moral and spiritual realm. You know that some of your customers are engaged in activities that the church condemns. You know that sex work likely occurs in rooms you are renting. You know that information shared in your tavern might be used for theft or fraud. By providing the space, are you complicit? Is your soul in danger because of the activities that occur in your tavern? These questions may not be consciously articulated, but they exist in the background of your mind. Medieval people are, in general, quite pious. They fear damnation. They worry about the state of their souls. An innkeeper operates in a morally ambiguous space, providing a necessary service, but also facilitating behavior that the church condemns. There is also a profound anxiety about the future. The medieval world is uncertain. Harvest failures happen. Plague passes through towns and empties them. Wars create instability and disruption to trade. A king's death might be followed by succession disputes that create chaos. Any of these events could destroy your tavern, could eliminate your income, could leave you destitute. You have no pension. You have no safety net. If you can no longer work, you will be poor. If your tavern is destroyed, you have lost everything. There is no insurance, no compensation, no recourse. You are entirely dependent on your ability to maintain the current situation. This creates a constant, low-level anxiety. You manage it through routine, the ritual of the morning fire, the familiar rhythms of the day, the knowledge that you have done this thousands of times before. All of this provides a kind of comfort, a sense that things are under control, even when they are not. But the anxiety breaks through sometimes. Late at night, you find yourself unable to sleep. Your mind races with calculations: how much money you have, how much you owe, what happens if a major expense arises. You think about the damp spot on the wall that might indicate the roof is leaking. You think about the fact that the door to the storage room is warping and will soon not close properly. You think about the grain price, which has been rising, which will eat into your profits. These are not just idle worries. These are real problems that require real solutions, and they cost real money that you do not always have. There is also the psychological toll of constant social performance. You cannot simply be yourself in your tavern. You must always be on, alert, responsive, managing the social dynamics, presenting a face that invites customers while maintaining boundaries. You must smile at people you do not like. You must treat people you might actually despise. You must be simultaneously friendly and authoritative, approachable and commanding. This performance is exhausting. It depletes something in you. At the end of a busy day, when you have finally closed the tavern, when the last customer has left, you are not just physically tired, you are emotionally drained. You have been performing a role for 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours. The mask has become permanent. You are not sure anymore what you look like without it. There is also the psychological toll of violence, of witnessing human aggression regularly. You have seen men seriously injured in fights in your tavern. You have seen blood. You have heard bones break. You have listened to the sound of a man screaming in pain. These experiences change a person. They create a kind of hardness, a protection mechanism. You become less shocked by violence, more willing to use it yourself if necessary. You become more cynical about human nature, less idealistic about human goodness. But underneath the hardness, there is also empathy. You see suffering constantly. You see people who have lost their livelihoods, who are sick, who are desperate. You have to decide, day after day, who to help and who to turn away. You have given food to people who could not pay, hoping that karma or God or simple decency would be rewarded somehow. You have also refused food to people who were hungry because you could not afford to give it away. These decisions weigh on you. There is also something else, though, something that the darkness and the anxiety do not capture. There is also a sense of purpose, of mattering. You are providing something valuable. People come to your tavern and they find community. They find safety. They find a place where they can relax, be themselves, enjoy food and drink and the company of others. Merchants come to your tavern and conduct business that enriches their lives. Travelers come to your tavern and find shelter when they might otherwise be exposed to danger. You are not just running a business. You are providing a public service. You are maintaining the social fabric of your community. You are the person who knows everyone's business, who maintains connections between different groups, who facilitates transactions and communication. This matters. It might not matter to the broader world, but it matters locally. When people talk about places to stay, about good taverns, your tavern is mentioned by name. This is success. This is legacy. Of a sort, a modern business owner might experience some of the same anxiety, the same sense of responsibility, the same awareness of potential failure. But the medieval innkeeper experiences these things without any of the modern safety mechanisms. No accountant, no lawyer, no business advisor, no financial safety net. Additionally, the medieval innkeeper operates in a moral framework that is quite different. The modern business owner is expected to be amoral, to pursue profit without concern for broader ethical questions. The medieval innkeeper operates in a religious framework where moral questions are paramount. You are supposed to be charitable, generous, hospitable, but you are also supposed to make a profit. The tension between these expectations creates additional psychological strain. What we understand from this exploration is that the medieval innkeeper's life is not just difficult physically, but psychologically difficult. The constant anxiety, the sense of responsibility, the moral ambiguity, the exhaustion from constant social performance, all of these take a toll. And yet, many innkeepers sustain this life for years, for decades. They develop coping mechanisms. They find meaning in their work. They create a kind of equilibrium, however precarious. We have explored the darker, more difficult aspects of the innkeeper's experience. But there is also joy, also meaning, also moments of genuine connection and satisfaction. To understand the complete picture, we must also explore what makes this life worth living, what rewards make the burden bearable. Your tavern is not just a commercial establishment. It is also a cultural center. It is a place where entertainment happens, where stories are told, where music is played, where people gather to forget, for a moment, the harshness of their lives. On any given evening, your tavern might host a traveling musician or a storyteller passing through town. Local musicians might gather to play together. People might play games, dice, cards, board games. Customers might simply enjoy the company of others. The comfort of being around people, the simple pleasure of shared humanity. It is evening. The fire in the hearth is burning well, providing heat and light and a sense of comfort. The common room is moderately full, perhaps 20 people, a mix of regulars and travelers. The noise level is high, with multiple conversations overlapping, but it is a pleasant noise, the sound of human engagement and enjoyment. In one corner, two men are playing chess, a luxury item, suggesting they have some wealth and education. They bend over the board intently, concentrating on their moves. They are not playing for money, but they are playing seriously, with genuine investment in the outcome. At a table near the fire, a group of craftsmen are playing dice. They are playing for stakes. Money is changing hands, but it is friendly, good-natured. There is laughter. Someone wins a particularly lucky roll, and his companions roar with approval and playful accusation. Near the counter, a young couple, a merchant and his wife, perhaps, or a young man and woman who are involved in an illicit relationship, sit close together, speaking in low voices. Their ale sits untouched. Their attention is entirely on each other and the moment of intimacy. The door opens and a man enters, carrying a lute. He is recognizable as a traveling musician. There is something in his bearing, in the way he moves, that suggests this is his livelihood. He approaches you, the innkeeper, and makes a proposition. He offers to play music in exchange for ale and food. You agree. The musician takes a seat near the fire and begins to tune his lute. The sound of tuning spreads through the tavern, and gradually the noise level decreases. People turn to look. A traveling musician is relatively rare, not so rare that he is extraordinary, but rare enough that his presence is noteworthy. He begins to play. The music that emerges is simple but beautiful. It is a folk melody, one that many people know. Some of the customers begin to sing along, quietly at first, then more loudly, more confidently. The song builds, becoming communal. For a moment, all the separate conversations, all the separate activities merge into a single shared experience. The song ends. There is applause, brief and sincere. The musician launches into another song, a different one, perhaps a comedic one that tells a story of mistaken identity or romantic entanglement. The audience laughs. The energy in the room rises. And here is the interesting thing. During these moments of shared entertainment, the tavern is not primarily a commercial establishment. Money is still being exchanged. The musician will be paid with ale and food. Customers are still consuming and paying for their drinks, but the transaction feels secondary. The primary thing is the human connection, the moment of shared enjoyment, the relief from the constant anxiety and hardship that characterizes medieval life. You, as the innkeeper, experience this too. You can step back from your role as money taker and proprietor. You can enjoy the music. You can feel the pleasure of having facilitated this moment of human connection. But entertainment is not just about musicians. Local people might gather for music, bringing their own instruments, playing together. Drums, pipes, simple stringed instruments. People might sing together without instrumental accompaniment. The quality might be rough. The music might be discordant, but the participation is what matters. Everyone is included. Everyone is invited to sing. Storytelling is another form of entertainment. A merchant might tell stories about travel, about distant lands, about the unusual things he has seen. An older person might tell stories about the past, about events that happened before the younger people were born. A clergyman might tell religious stories, Bible stories, miracle tales. A traveling entertainer might tell bawdy stories, inappropriate, comedic, thrilling because they are slightly scandalous. These stories serve multiple purposes. They entertain, they educate, They provide gossip and information. They help people make sense of the world. They provide common reference points for the community. Games serve similar functions. Dice and cards provide the thrill of chance, the possibility of winning money, but they also provide entertainment and social connection. The rules of games are complex enough to require attention and mental engagement, which is valuable to people whose lives are otherwise consumed with physical labor and repetitive tasks. Games provide a brief opportunity to engage the mind, to try to exercise strategy and luck. Then there are the unofficial celebrations and gatherings that occur in and around your tavern. When a merchant fair comes to town, your tavern is packed with merchants, and the atmosphere is celebratory. When a religious festival occurs, people gather, and the festive mood extends to the tavern. When a young couple gets married, the wedding party might be celebrated in your tavern. On summer evenings, if the weather is good, people might gather in the courtyard outside your tavern, and the boundary between the tavern and the public space becomes blurred. There might be games, there might be music, there might be simple socializing. Your role as innkeeper extends into these spaces. You are providing food and drink, you are managing the space, you are part of the social facilitation. For you, the innkeeper, these moments of entertainment and culture are not just economically beneficial, though they are that entertainment attracts people, and entertainment brings money in the form of customers consuming food and drink. They are also spiritually and emotionally nourishing. You are part of a community. You are facilitating human connection. You are providing something valuable that is not merely material. A modern bar or restaurant owner might view entertainment as a marketing tool, a way to attract customers. They might hire entertainment, thinking about return on investment. A medieval innkeeper does not think in these terms. Entertainment is valuable in itself, as a human activity. It attracts people, yes, but the primary value is human, not commercial. What we understand from this exploration is that the medieval tavern, despite being a commercial establishment, is fundamentally a social and cultural institution. It is a place where people come not just to consume, but to connect, to share, to enjoy. As an innkeeper, you are not just an entrepreneur, but a kind of cultural facilitator, a keeper of community spaces. We are nearing the end of our exploration of the medieval innkeeper's life. We have examined the work, the finances, the social dynamics, the dangers, the psychological burden, and the cultural role. But there is one more dimension to explore: what happens at the end. How does a life spent in this role shape a person? What legacy does an innkeeper leave? You are 43 years old. In the medieval world, this is not particularly old, but it is not particularly young either. Life expectancy is lower than in the modern world. Childhood diseases take many people, and childbirth is deadly for women. But if you have survived to 43, you have reasonable prospects for another 2 decades or more of life, assuming no catastrophe befalls you. But you are aware of mortality in a way that modern people are not. You have lost people close to you. Your first wife died in childbirth. Your second wife died from a flux. You have had employees die from plague. You have had customers die sometimes in your tavern if they were particularly ill, or sometimes in the town, and you simply learn about it through gossip. You have seen the bones of people who died and were buried in the churchyard. Mortality is not an abstract concept, it is a constant reality. The awareness of mortality shapes your priorities in subtle ways. You are careful with money, but not miserly. You could probably accumulate more wealth if you were more ruthless in your business practices, if you watered down the ale more, if you cheated your customers, but you do not do these things. Why? Partly because it would damage your reputation, and reputation is essential to survival, but also, partly, because you are conscious of mortality. You know that eventually you will die, and you do not want to be remembered as a cheat and a fraud. You care about reputation. You want to be remembered as someone who ran a good tavern, someone fair, someone honest, someone who provided good food and good ale, someone who was friendly to travelers, who did not cheat customers, who treated workers with respect. These are the things you think about late at night when you cannot sleep. You also think about what will happen to your tavern after you die. If you have children, perhaps they will inherit it. Perhaps they will run it and maintain it. Or perhaps they will have no interest in running a tavern and they will sell it to someone else. Will that person maintain the reputation? Will they run it with the same standards that you do? You worry about this, even though you can do nothing about it. If you do not have children, or if your children are not interested in inheriting the tavern, you have probably thought about who you might leave it to. Perhaps a loyal employee who has been with you for many years. Perhaps someone in your family, a cousin, a nephew. Perhaps it will pass to the local lord or the church, or it will be sold at auction. These thoughts might seem abstract, but they shape your actions. They give you a sense of purpose beyond mere money-making. You are building something that you hope will outlast you. You are creating a legacy. The legacy of an innkeeper is perhaps smaller than the legacy of a nobleman or a merchant prince or a religious figure, but it is not insignificant. Your tavern is a gathering place. It shapes the social life of your community. It facilitates commerce. It provides employment. In a small way, it is part of the infrastructure of medieval civilization. You are also, in a sense, an archivist of information. You know the news of the town. You know who is getting married, who is getting divorced, who is cheating on whom, who is in debt, who is struggling financially, who has come into money. You know the gossip. You know the secrets. In a world before newspapers, before the internet, before electronic media, people like you are the distribution centers of information. What you know, what you tell, what you repeat, this shapes what people know and believe. This is a kind of power, and you are conscious of it. You choose, consciously or unconsciously, what information to spread and what to keep secret. A customer might confess something to you while drunk, something they would not want widely known. What do? Some innkeepers become known as gossips. They repeat everything, and their tavern becomes a node in the information network where gossip is distributed. Other innkeepers become known as discretionary. They keep secrets. People can trust them, and they become confidants. You have probably chosen to be somewhat discretionary because it builds trust and loyalty. People are more likely to come to a tavern where they believe their confidence will be kept. So you are selective about what you repeat, what you emphasize, what you downplay. This means you are not just serving food and ale. You are shaping the information environment of your community. You are, in a small way, a kind of journalist or public intellectual. You are also preserving tradition. The methods you use to brew ale, to prepare food, to manage the tavern, these are traditional methods passed down from previous innkeepers. You are both maintaining these traditions and adapting them slightly based on your own experience and innovation. Some of these innovations will be preserved, will be passed on to whoever inherits your tavern or works for you and then moves on to another tavern. You are part of an unbroken chain of knowledge and practice that stretches backward and forward in time. You think about death sometimes, not with fear, perhaps, but with acceptance. Death is inevitable. You have accepted this. Your concern is not whether you will die, you certainly will, but how you will die and what will be said about you afterward. You hope you will not die in agony. You hope you will not die alone. You hope you will not die with debts unpaid and your affairs in disarray. You hope your family will be provided for, and you hope, perhaps most importantly, that you will be remembered fondly, that people will say, "He was a good innkeeper," that they will remember the tavern as a pleasant place, that they will remember you as fair and honest. This consciousness of legacy and mortality gives your daily work meaning beyond the immediate. Yes, you are making money, but money is not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to leave something behind, to have mattered, to have created something that will outlast you, even if only in the memory of people who came to your tavern and had a good experience. A modern business owner might think about legacy, about creating something lasting, but they operate within a society where wealth can accumulate across generations through legal means. A medieval innkeeper knows that accumulation is limited, that the primary legacy is reputation and the physical property of the tavern. This creates different priorities and different values. What we understand from this exploration is that the medieval innkeeper's life, despite being difficult and often stressful, is also meaningful. The work matters, the reputation matters, the legacy matters. These give purpose to the exhausting daily labor. These give meaning to the financial calculations and social negotiations. We have now explored the complete arc of the medieval innkeeper's life: the physical work, the financial management, the social navigation, the dangers, the psychological burden, the cultural role, and the awareness of legacy and mortality. It is time to step back and reflect on what all of this means, what we have learned about the medieval world and about human nature itself. The medieval innkeeper lived in a very different world than a modern business owner, but there are also surprising continuities. The fundamental challenges of running a hospitality business, managing finances, handling customers, navigating social dynamics, dealing with theft and fraud, maintaining a good reputation are remarkably constant across time. Let us imagine a modern hotel owner or bar owner in a contemporary city. They face some of the same challenges as you, the medieval innkeeper. They must manage finances carefully. A single bad season could threaten their business. They must hire and manage staff. They must track inventory and manage suppliers. They must maintain their reputation. Negative reviews on the internet can damage their business as severely as negative word of mouth damages your tavern. They must also deal with theft from customers who do not pay, from staff who steal. They must deal with violence, drunken arguments that escalate, altercations between customers. They must navigate complex social situations. They must deal with difficult customers, with people who demand more than they are willing to pay for. So, in these practical ways, the work is similar, but there are profound differences rooted in the different technologies, legal systems, and social structures of their respective worlds. The modern hotel owner has access to vast amounts of information about their business. They can check daily revenues in real time on a computer. They can see which items are selling well and which are not. They can track their profit and loss automatically through accounting software. They can compare their business to other similar businesses, see how they are doing relative to their competitors, benchmarks against industry standards. You, the medieval innkeeper, have no such tools. Your accounting exists only in your head and perhaps in tally sticks or rough notations on parchment. You do not know your actual profit until you sit down and try to calculate it, and even then, your calculation might be wrong. You have no way to compare your business to other taverns except through conversation and gossip. You are flying blind, essentially relying on experience and intuition to make decisions. The modern hotel owner has legal protection. If a customer refuses to pay, they can pursue legal action. If a supplier cheats them, they can take them to court. If someone commits a crime against their business, they can call the police. They operate within a framework of law that is written down, applied consistently, theoretically, and enforced by professional authorities. You have no such protection. Your recourse is limited to social pressure, personal authority, and the threat of violence. A customer who refuses to pay cannot be taken to court. The cost of legal action would be prohibitive. Your only option is to refuse service in the future, to damage their reputation socially, or to take matters into your own hands. The modern hotel owner has insurance. If there is a fire, if someone is injured on the premises, if there is major theft or damage, insurance will cover at least some of the loss. You have no such protection. Any catastrophic loss is a catastrophic loss. You must either recover through your own efforts or accept ruin. The modern hotel owner operates in a relatively stable legal and social environment. Tax rates are set and published. Regulations are clear. They know what they must do to comply with the law. There is still corruption and fraud and unfair practices, but there is also a framework of transparency and accountability. You operate in an environment of tremendous legal and social uncertainty. Tax rates are arbitrary. Regulations are unclear or non-existent. A new official might decide to interpret old laws in new ways, suddenly creating new obligations. Corruption is rampant and rarely punished. The modern hotel owner can hire professionals to help them, an accountant to manage finances, a lawyer to handle legal issues, a consultant to advise on strategy. They can delegate tasks and focus on the big picture. You must do everything yourself or train an apprentice to help you. You cannot afford to hire specialists. You must be an accountant, a lawyer, a negotiator, a security guard, a manager, a chef, all at once. The modern hotel owner operates in a world of relative comfort. The building is probably heated and cooled. The lighting is electric. The work is physically easier. They can go home at the end of the day and leave their work behind. The next day, they return to it, but they have had a break. You never truly leave your work. Your home is often in the tavern. Even when you are not actively working, you are conscious of the fire, of the security, of potential problems. You wake at night worried about something you forgot to do. Your work is not something you do, it is something you are. And yet, there are continuities as well. The modern hotel owner probably feels some of the same pride that you feel in running a good establishment. They probably care about their reputation, about providing good service. They probably worry about the future, about potential threats to their business. They probably feel responsible for their employees, hoping that their business will provide stable employment. The fundamental human experience of running a business, the mixture of anxiety and satisfaction, the balance between profit and principle, the investment of identity in the success or failure of the enterprise is remarkably consistent across time. If we could somehow transport a medieval innkeeper to a modern hotel and have them observe operations, they would be amazed by the technology, by the legal protections, by the access to information. But they would also recognize what is happening. They would understand the fundamental principles of guest management, inventory control, and reputation building. The details would be different, but the core would be recognizable. Conversely, if we could somehow transport a modern hotel owner back to the medieval tavern, they would be shocked and horrified by the conditions, the lack of tools and protections. But they would also recognize what was happening. They would understand that they were watching a human being trying to make a living, trying to provide a service, trying to build something that would outlast them. In this way, the medieval innkeeper is not so alien from us. They are doing something fundamentally human, trying to create value, trying to survive, trying to build a legacy. It is worth noting that while the medieval innkeeper lacks many of the modern hotel owner's tools and protections, they have some advantages as well. Their customers are not anonymous. They build long-term relationships with customers who return regularly. Word of mouth is the only form of marketing, which means reputation is paramount, but it also means that loyalty is strong. A modern hotel owner might be able to operate an anonymous, transactional business where customers are interchangeable. A medieval innkeeper could never operate this way. Every customer is a person with a face, a name, a story. The relationship is personal. This creates vulnerability. Personal relationships can be betrayed, but it also creates resilience. A customer who has a relationship with an innkeeper is more likely to forgive a minor problem, more likely to return despite competition. What we understand from this exploration is that the medieval innkeeper's work, while vastly different in its context and tools, is fundamentally similar to modern hospitality work. The challenges are the same. The satisfactions are the same. The fundamental human struggles are the same. We have now explored the medieval innkeeper's life from almost every angle. We have looked at the work, the finances, the social dynamics, the dangers, the psychological dimensions, the cultural role, the legacy. We are ready now to step back and reflect on what this entire exploration means, to draw it together into a final reflection on the human experience across time. The story of the medieval innkeeper is, in many ways, the story of the entire medieval world. It is a story of tremendous difficulty, of constant struggle against poverty and disease and danger. It is a story of work that is never finished, where rest is a luxury and relaxation is almost unimaginable. But it is also a story of meaning. The medieval innkeeper is not simply grinding away at meaningless labor. Their work has purpose. They are providing shelter to travelers who might otherwise be exposed to danger. They are providing nourishment to people who might otherwise go hungry. They are providing a gathering place for community, a space where human connection can occur. In a medieval world that is often portrayed as brutal and meaningless, the innkeeper's work is deeply meaningful. They are not building wealth for its own sake, though they do care about making enough money to survive. They are creating something that matters. The medieval innkeeper is also engaged in remarkably sophisticated work. Yes, the tools are primitive compared to modern tools. Yes, the knowledge is limited compared to modern knowledge. But within their constraints, they are doing complex work. They are managing finances. They are building relationships. They are navigating complex social hierarchies. They are solving problems creatively. They are making ethical decisions. The innkeeper is a representative of what we might call the practical intellect, the kind of intelligence that emerges not from formal education, but from daily engagement with reality. They might not be able to read Latin or construct a formal logical argument, but they can calculate costs and benefits quickly. They can read people's faces and understand their intentions. They can manage complex systems of human relationships and practical logistics. This is not less intelligent than formal learning. It is a different kind of intelligence. Perhaps the most important lesson from contemplating the medieval innkeeper is the recognition that human beings can find meaning and satisfaction in work that is difficult and often unrewarding in material terms. The medieval innkeeper probably did not become wealthy. They probably never achieved significant status or power. They probably died and were soon forgotten by anyone outside their immediate community. And yet, their life was not wasted. Their life was not meaningless. They provided something valuable. They maintained a space that was important to their community. They treated people with respect and fairness. They built something that outlasted them, at least for a time. In the modern world, we often hear that work should be fulfilling, that we should pursue our passions, that we should not settle for meaningless jobs. This is good advice, in a way, but the medieval innkeeper did not have the luxury of seeking fulfillment through work choice. They worked because they had to work, because the only alternative to work was destitution and possibly starvation. And yet, within the constraints of necessity, they managed to build something meaningful. They managed to invest themselves in their work. They managed to care about doing it well. Perhaps this is the deepest lesson. Meaning is not something that arrives from without, through perfect circumstances or ideal conditions. Meaning is something that we create through the investment of ourselves in our work, through commitment to doing things well, through relationships with others, and recognition of our responsibility to them. The medieval innkeeper did not have perfect circumstances. They had terrible circumstances by modern standards, but they created meaning within those circumstances. If we step back very far, if we look at the entire arc of human history, we see that there have always been innkeepers, always been people who have created gathering places for travelers and locals alike. The Roman villa had its role in this, a space where merchants and travelers could find shelter. Medieval taverns inherited this role and expanded it. Modern hotels and bars continue it in their own way. There is something fundamentally human about the role. We are social creatures. We need gathering places. We need communities. We need to be able to move through the world and find welcome and shelter. The person who creates and maintains that gathering place, who provides welcome and shelter, who facilitates community and commerce, this is a role that has existed across centuries, across cultures. The medieval innkeeper is one instantiation of this universal human role. And in contemplating the medieval innkeeper, in imagining ourselves in their position, we are not just learning about the past. We are learning about something fundamental about human nature. We are learning about the possibility of meaning within constraint. We are learning about the importance of community and gathering. We are learning about the particular satisfaction that comes from providing service, from facilitating human connection. The medieval innkeeper lived in a different world, with different tools and different challenges, but they were fundamentally like us. They worried about money. They cared about their reputation. They felt responsible for others. They hoped to create something that would outlast them. And now, as we prepare to close this exploration, let us return to where we began. Let us imagine the medieval innkeeper at the end of a long day. The common room is empty. The fire is burning low. The ale barrels are empty. The dishes have been washed. The money has been counted and secured. The innkeeper climbs the stairs to their sleeping chamber, bone-tired, shoulders aching from the day's labor. They lie down on their straw mattress. The darkness surrounds them. Tomorrow, the fire must be lit before dawn. Tomorrow, the work will begin again. Tomorrow, guests will arrive and demands will be made. Tomorrow, there will be challenges to navigate and problems to solve. But tonight, the innkeeper rests. Tonight, they have provided shelter to 30 people. Tonight, they served good food and ale. Tonight, they have maintained a space where people gathered and found community and connection. This is enough. This is meaningful. This is why the work continues. In the darkness, the innkeeper drifts towards sleep. Their mind begins to slow. The constant calculations begin to quiet. For a brief moment, before sleep takes them completely, they experience something like peace. The flame of the dying fire reflects on the stone wall, dancing gently. Outside, the medieval world continues its ancient rhythms. Wars and politics and tragedies unfold in distant courts. Plagues sweep through villages. Saints are venerated and heretics are condemned. But here, in this tavern, there is quiet, there is warmth, there is the knowledge that something meaningful has been done. The innkeeper sleeps, and when they wake before dawn, in the darkness, as always, the fire must be lit. The work continues. But for now, there is rest. Sleep well, ancient innkeeper. Rest from your labor. Know that your work, however humble, however overlooked by history, was real and important. You mattered. Your tavern mattered. Your community knew your value, even if future generations would not. Sleep in the darkness, in the knowledge that you have lived a life of purpose, however constrained the circumstances. You have provided shelter and nourishment and community. You have maintained the social fabric. You have done what humans have always done, created a gathering place, a hearth, a home away from home. Sleep well. And when the dawn comes, rise again. Light the fire, haul the water. Begin the day's work. This is the life of the medieval innkeeper. This is a meditation on work and meaning and human purpose. This is a reminder that meaning is not something granted by circumstance, but something created through commitment, through care, through the investment of ourselves in the world. May we all find such meaning in our own work, in our own lives, in our own time. The medieval innkeeper's life is shaped profoundly by the seasons. This is not merely a poetic observation, it is a practical reality that shapes almost every aspect of your work. The rhythm of your tavern changes dramatically between summer and winter, between harvest and planting, between the busy seasons of travel and the quiet seasons when people stay home. Understanding this rhythm and learning to navigate it is one of the most important skills an innkeeper can develop, because success is not about doing the same thing every day. Success is about adapting to changing conditions while maintaining some core consistency. Winter is the most difficult season. The cold is intense. Heating the tavern requires enormous amounts of fuel. Wood must be stored and dried through the autumn, or your supply will run short. The cost of heat eats into your profits significantly. Winter is also when travel decreases. People do not travel as much in winter. The roads are dangerous in snow and ice. Animals struggle to move through deep snow. People stay home, gathering with family and community for warmth and survival. This means your tavern is less busy. Your regular customers come less frequently. Travelers are rare, but winter is also when your regular customers are most likely to spend time in your tavern, because the tavern is the warmest place in town. They gather around your fire. They spend their pennies on ale. They linger longer than they would in other seasons, because the alternative is going home to a cold house. Winter is also when food preservation becomes critical. The food you stored in autumn, dried vegetables, salted meat, preserved cheese, must last through the winter. If you miscalculated and run short, you must purchase expensive foods at premium prices, or you must serve less good food, which damages your reputation. Winter is when your ale inventory is most critical. Ale must be brewed in autumn so it has time to mature. If you run out in winter, you cannot simply brew more. The cold makes brewing difficult, and you would run out before new ale could mature anyway. So you must carefully manage your reserves, rationing ale to make sure you do not run short. Spring brings change. The roads become passable again. Merchants start traveling. Pilgrims begin their journeys to distant shrines. The tavern becomes busier. Your regular customers might decrease their visits because they are working in the fields, preparing them for the spring planting. But there is also new food available in spring. Fresh greens, fresh herbs. The monotony of winter food, heavy, preserved, similar day after day, gives way to more variety. Your kitchen becomes more interesting. The quality of your food improves. Your customers notice and appreciate it. Summer is the busiest season. Travel is at its maximum. The weather is good, making travel safer. Merchants move between towns, conducting trade. Pilgrims travel to shrines. Soldiers move between postings. Labor migrations happen, people move between towns looking for work. Your tavern is full. Every room is rented. Your ale sells constantly. Your food is consumed as fast as you can prepare it. The common room is crowded from morning until late night. You are earning money faster than in any other season, but summer is also stressful. The heat, combined with crowding, creates sanitation problems. Flies congregate, smells intensify, disease spreads more easily. The heat makes physical work more exhausting. You are working hard, constantly, with minimal breaks. Summer is also when prices for food increase, because much of the population is focused on harvesting or other agricultural work, meaning less is coming to market. You have to pay more for the same foods that were cheaper in spring. Autumn is the transition season. The harvest is happening, which means new food is becoming available at good prices. The tavern becomes busy again as merchants move goods to market, as news travels about harvest results, as people celebrate the successful harvest or mourn a poor one. But the days are getting shorter. The weather is becoming colder. You must begin preparations for winter. You must arrange for wood to be cut and dried. You must preserve food for the winter ahead. You must plan for the season when travel will decrease and your tavern will be less busy. Beyond the immediate seasonal changes, there are also longer-term patterns. Some years are better than others. A good harvest means more food and lower prices. More food means better nutrition for people, fewer diseases, more trade. A good harvest is good for your business. A poor harvest is a disaster. Poor harvests mean expensive food. They mean malnutrition, which leads to disease. They mean less trade because merchants have less to sell. They mean lower customer spending because people are worried about food security. A poor harvest year can be financially devastating for an innkeeper. Plague is a catastrophic disruption to these normal patterns. A plague year is a year of death and fear. People do not travel if there is plague. Towns close their gates to outsiders. Business collapses. People flee to the countryside. An inn in a plague-affected town might see its revenues drop to almost nothing. But plague can also create opportunities. Paradoxically, if plague strikes a nearby town but not yours, travelers and refugees might flee to your town. Your tavern becomes a shelter for the desperate. You might raise your prices and make more money, or you might charge less to help people and build goodwill. As an innkeeper, you develop an almost instinctive understanding of these rhythms. You know when to prepare for quiet seasons, when to expect busy times, when to stock up, when to reduce inventory. You know which suppliers have reliable access to goods in different seasons. You adjust your staffing based on seasonal demand, hiring extra help in summer, reducing staff in winter. This knowledge is not written down. You have learned it through years of trial and error. You have made mistakes overstocked in winter and had food spoil, understocked in summer and run out of ale. You have learned from these mistakes, and this knowledge is valuable. It is one of the reasons your tavern survives, while other taverns, run by people less experienced or less attentive, fail. A modern business owner operates in an environment where seasons matter less. Transportation and food preservation technology have largely removed seasonal constraints. A modern hotel can heat or cool to comfortable temperatures, regardless of outside temperature. A modern restaurant can source food from anywhere in the world, so seasonal availability is not a constraint. The medieval innkeeper, by contrast, is intimately connected to the seasons. The seasons shape your work, your income, your possibilities. You cannot escape the season. you must adapt to it. What we understand from this exploration is that medieval life is deeply rhythmic, shaped by natural cycles. This rhythm affects not just agriculture, but commerce, travel, and hospitality as well. The innkeeper must be attentive to these rhythms, must learn to work with them rather than against them. We have explored the medieval innkeeper's life at great length. The daily work, the financial dimensions, the social dynamics, the dangers, the psychological burden, the cultural role, the legacy, the seasonal patterns. We are nearing the end of our meditation on this life. It is time to return to the present moment and reflect on what it all means. The medieval innkeeper is not isolated from history. Major events, wars, famines, plagues, political upheavals inevitably affect the tavern. These moments can bring opportunities or disasters. Imagine a specific historical moment that you, as a medieval innkeeper, might experience. A major trade route shifts, perhaps due to political changes, perhaps due to conflicts between rival powers. The merchant traffic that has formed the backbone of your business redirects to a different road, a different town. What do? You must adapt. Perhaps you travel to the new trade route to establish a new tavern. Perhaps you rebrand your tavern as a gathering place for local craftspeople rather than merchants. Perhaps you develop relationships with different merchants and traders. Perhaps your business suffers for years until you find a new equilibrium. Or imagine that a young nobleman from a distant part of the kingdom arrives in your town with a significant retinue. He likes your tavern. He establishes a kind of court there, gathering there regularly with his friends and associates. Your tavern suddenly becomes fashionable. More people visit because they want to see where the nobleman goes. Your reputation is elevated. Your business booms. Then the nobleman is involved in a scandal. He falls out of favor with the king. He leaves town or is arrested. Your tavern's reputation is damaged by association. Business suffers. Or imagine a war coming to your region. An army marches through, occupying the town. The soldiers might favor your tavern. They have money and they want entertainment and respite from military life. Your tavern becomes a gathering place for soldiers. You make significant money, but you also take risks. Soldiers can be dangerous. Violence can break out. You might be accused of treason if the army is later defeated and seen as having supported the wrong side. Or imagine the opposite, your town is besieged. The army occupying it is on the defensive. People are starving. Trade has stopped. People have fled to the countryside. Your tavern becomes a refuge for displaced people who have nowhere else to go. You might provide food and shelter out of charity, or you might charge high prices to people who are desperate. Either way, this is a moment that tests your character and forces you to make ethical decisions. Or imagine plague comes. People are dying. There is panic and fear. Some people flee. Some people barricade themselves in their homes and refuse to leave. Some people gather in public places, in taverns, seeking community and comfort against the terror of disease and death. Do you open your tavern to people who might be infected? Do you risk your own health and the health of your staff? Do you charge high prices to desperate people? Or do you provide service at normal prices or even at a loss? These decisions are not just financial, they are moral decisions that affect how people view you and remember you. All of these scenarios have actually occurred to real medieval innkeepers. The innkeeper's life is not isolated from history, it is deeply embedded in history. Major events reverberate through the tavern. The innkeeper must respond, adapt, and navigate. This is part of what makes the innkeeper's job so complex. It is not just about daily management of a business. It is also about positioning yourself within the larger historical moment, understanding the currents of change, adapting your business and your strategies as circumstances shift. A modern business owner also operates within history, economic cycles, political changes, technological disruptions affect modern businesses. But the medieval innkeeper is more directly and immediately affected by historical events. Wars are not distant news, they are at your door. Plagues are not something you read about, they kill people in your community. Political changes directly affect your tax burden and regulatory environment. What we understand is that the medieval innkeeper is not a static figure operating in a static medieval world. The medieval world is dynamic, changing, affected by wars and plagues and political upheavals, just as the modern world is. The innkeeper must be flexible, adaptive, responsive to changing circumstances. We are now approaching the final reflection on the medieval innkeeper's life. We have explored almost every dimension: the work, the finances, the social dynamics, the dangers, the psychological experience, the cultural role, the legacy, the seasonal patterns, the historical context. It is time to conclude our meditation. When we step back and look at the entire picture, we have painted the medieval innkeeper in all their complexity, all their labor, all their worry and achievement. What do we see? We see a person who is engaged in genuinely important work. Not important in the sense of being recognized by history or celebrated by society, but important in the immediate, local sense. The innkeeper is essential to the functioning of their community. Without the innkeeper, travel would be more dangerous, commerce would be more difficult, the community would have fewer gathering places. We see a person who is engaged in complex intellectual work, even if it is not recognized as such. The calculations about finances, the navigation of social relationships, the management of inventory, the adaptation to changing circumstances, these all require intelligence and skill. We see a person who faces constant challenges and somehow persists. The challenges never really go away. Tomorrow brings new problems, but the innkeeper wakes and faces them anyway. We see a person who has created something meaningful within the constraints of their circumstances. They have not created wealth, not if we are being honest. Innkeepers were not typically rich, but they have created something: a functioning business, a gathering place, a reputation for fairness and good service. We see a person who cares about their work. They could have done it poorly. They could have watered down the ale excessively, served spoiled food, cheated customers, mistreated staff. Some innkeepers probably did these things, but the successful innkeepers, the ones whose taverns survived and whose reputations were good, cared about doing it well. And we see a person who understood, on some level, that their work mattered, that they were providing something valuable, that they were part of a chain of human endeavor, stretching backward and forward in time. Perhaps the deepest insight we can draw from contemplating the medieval innkeeper is the recognition that meaning is not something that comes from outside circumstances. Meaning is not something granted by wealth or status or recognition. Meaning is something that emerges from commitment to work, from relationships with others, from the recognition that what you do matters, even if only in small ways. The medieval innkeeper probably never read philosophy or theology. They probably never consciously thought about the meaning of their life in abstract terms, but they lived a meaningful life nonetheless. They lived it through action, through showing up day after day, through trying to do their work well, through relationships with customers and staff. In a world that often tries to convince us that only certain kinds of work are valuable, only work that is prestigious or highly paid or widely recognized, the medieval innkeeper reminds us that ordinary work, humble work, work done well and with commitment, is also valuable. As we reach the end of our exploration, let us imagine one more moment. It is evening, not morning. The day's work is done. The customers have begun to leave. The common room is quieting. You, the innkeeper, move about the tavern, checking on things. You make sure the shutters are secure. You check the storehouse to make sure nothing is disturbed. You count the money from the day and secure it in its hiding place. You ensure that the fire is burning at a level that will allow it to smolder through the night without consuming excessive fuel. As you do these things, you feel a kind of satisfaction. The day has been good. Business was steady. No major problems occurred. You have fed people. You have provided shelter. You have earned enough money to maintain the tavern and pay your staff. Your staff has gone to sleep, or is preparing to. Your guests are settling into their rooms, or have gone home. The tavern is becoming quiet. You stand by the hearth, watching the fire. The flames are dying back now, falling to a controlled burn that will last through the night. You rake the coals slightly, exposing some of the heat, then add a single, carefully selected log that will burn slowly and steadily. This fire will burn all night. In the morning, when you wake before dawn, it will still be there. You will not have to strike steel on a flint and create fire from nothing. The coals will be warm, the fire will be waiting for you, and you will coax it back to strength. This is a kind of miracle, if you think about it. The continuity of fire, the chain that stretches back through time, fires lit by previous innkeepers, fires that have burned continuously for decades, flames that connect you to your predecessors and will, if the tavern survives, connect you to your successors. You think about this sometimes, late at night, when you are alone with the fire. You think about the innkeepers who ran this tavern before you. You wonder what they worried about, what they cared about, whether they loved this place as you do. And you think about who might run this tavern after you. Will they maintain the standards? Will they treat customers fairly? Will they remember the reputation you have built? These questions do not have answers. The future is unknown. But standing by the fire, you feel a kind of peace in accepting this uncertainty. The tavern will continue. The fire will continue to be lit. People will continue to gather. For a time, this matters. Your role in maintaining it matters. And then, eventually, you will be gone, and someone else will maintain the fire. This is how the world works. This is how human civilization continues, through the small, consistent efforts of ordinary people who care about doing their work well, who maintain the structures of community and commerce, who light fires in the darkness. You are one such person. Your work is one such effort. It is enough. And so, dear listener, we come to the end of our journey into the life of the medieval innkeeper. We walked through their tavern. We have felt the heat of their fire. We have calculated their finances with them. We have navigated their social relationships. We are worried about the future. In doing so, we have learned not just about the medieval world, but about something timeless in human experience. We have learned that meaningful work is not necessarily prestigious work. We have learned that ordinary people doing ordinary things are often the foundation upon which civilization rests. We have learned that care and commitment can transform work into meaning. As you drift back toward sleep, thinking about the medieval innkeeper in their tavern in that distant time, consider what this figure means to you. Do they seem alien and strange, impossibly far removed from your own life? Or do they seem, in some essential way, recognizable? A person working, worrying, caring, trying to create something that matters? The fires have been lit by innkeepers for centuries. The work continues. In a modest way, so does the work of all of us who care about maintaining structures of community and commerce and connection. Sleep now. Let the story of the medieval innkeeper follow you into dreams, and when you wake, remember that somewhere, someone is lighting a fire. Someone is beginning the day's work. Someone is trying as best they can to do their job well. This is enough. This is good. This is the eternal rhythm of human work and human meaning. Rest well, sleep deeply, and tomorrow light your own fires, do your own work, know that it matters. The end. Sleep well.